his training room, he would have all the hats up on the wall like this.
Yeah.
And he was really proud of his collection. And they sat up there and, they just were there on the wall like this. So I would go in, I'd take a Sharpie and I signed the underneath of the brim of all his favorite hats. And I put them back on the wall. So he didn't even know that I had signed them. And then one day, I don't know what happened. He took a hat off the wall and he saw my signature on there. And he's like, what the? He looks at another one. This was his treasured hat collection that he had. He was collecting these hats from all over, and he was so mad at me.
That is former Winnipeg Jet from the 1.0 days and current Chicago Blackhawks radio analyst Troy Murray joining us on Ground Control, the official podcast of the Winnipeg Jets. I'm Jamie Thomas alongside Tyler Esquivel. We'll talk about where Tyler was here momentarily, but Troy Murray, an expert, I'd have to say, on the Western Conference and the elite teams in the conference, which you have to say at this point, there's only 6. So you have to put Winnipeg, Colorado, Dallas, Edmonton, Vancouver, and Vegas in the conversation. Chicago has faced all 6 of those teams multiple times. So Troy, an expert on what each team brings and also sharing with us what he likes about the Winnipeg Jets so far this season. A lot of time to go here, but appreciate Troy for joining us, and we'll get to him momentarily. But first, you went away.
Yep.
You were not here for the last show.
Nope.
I've got used to you being here, so it was a little uncomfortable being by myself. But that's not your problem.
No.
Your problem is your honeymoon.
Yeah,
Yes.
on my honeymoon, my wife and I went down to Florida, enjoyed some time in the sun, just hung out by the pool. I read a book. I haven't read a book.
It's so funny when it's such a big deal when you read a book. I feel the same way.
It was great.
I actually finished a book.
It was awesome.
Yeah.
I felt so accomplished afterwards. So yeah, we did that, made some nice meals, and went to Disney World for a couple days.
Okay, so I've been to Disney World just once. Fantastic place.
How old were you?
I was an adult, so I took
Okay.
my much younger brother-in-law. He was 10 at the time.
Okay.
So yeah. It's nice to take somebody much younger. I've never taken my kids. My kids have been without me. That's neither here nor there because it's about you right now.
Oh, dear. Really uncovering
Not by
something.
myself. No. They went with family.
Okay.
You said 2 days. Is 2 days too much, too little?
It was perfect
Yeah.
for us. Just being 2 adults, no kids. It was nice. Got to ride the rides. Kind of did our own thing. First day we did Hollywood Studios. Rode everything. Rode the new Star Wars ride twice.
Yeah.
That was really cool. So if you're down there,
I love
I
Star
highly
Wars.
recommend that.
It's the best.
Yeah, so we were done with Hollywood Studios at like 6:30. We kind of just looked at each other and like, I've seen what I need to see.
Okay.
And then Magic Kingdom the second day, that was a much longer day. Obviously a bit of a bigger park, a lot more going on. We were there from like 10 in the morning till midnight, and then I had a 2-hour drive.
That's a grind.
Yeah, I had a 2-hour drive ahead of me after, so we didn't get home till like 2 in the morning.
Okay.
But it was good. Rode the roller coasters there. Had some food.
You had blue milk, though.
I had the blue milk.
And it's
very good. That's the second time I've actually had it. I went to Disneyland
a
few years ago when the team was in Anaheim. We had a day off, and we were like, yeah, why not?
Why do you think Luke Skywalker became the greatest Jedi ever? Because he drank blue milk,
Yeah,
flat out. Period.
Maybe that will happen to me.
You look different, so
Well, good.
It's all because of blue milk.
Yeah.
Glad to have you back. Something did happen while you were gone. Ordinarily during the All-Star break, player break, not much happens. Of course,
Yep.
players go their respective ways and their respective holidays. But of course, there was the big news. A day and a half after the the Vancouver Canucks paid a boatload to get Elias Lindholm from the Calgary Flames. The Jets acquire Sean Monahan for a 2024 first-round pick and a conditional third-round pick in 2027. You were in line for a ride.
Yep.
When you found out the news.
Yeah, I was in an 80-minute line as you do. The ride was not worth an 80-minute wait.
It never is.
It was not good.
Yeah.
But anyway, I was just scrolling through Twitter, and Dan Robertson tweeted just some Sean Monahan stats, and I thought, this is a bit odd. He used to work in Montreal, but maybe he's just like, hey, this could be a player we trade for. And anyway, I thought that was weird. And so I keep scrolling, and oh yeah, there's all the tweets. Like, looks like we've acquired Sean Monahan in Winnipeg. So then, again, killing more time, and my wife not really happy that I'm on my phone, but that's okay.
That's big news.
Yeah, it
So
was
it's a little
really
bit of
big
excuse.
news. It was really big news. So just processing it right then and there, and over the last few days, the Jets, that was sort of the need, was a second line center, and I think they went out and got that. And obviously the Lindholm trade, the price was pretty steep, and I don't think the Winnipeg Jets obviously were prepared to deliver something quite like that, but especially with Kuzmenko going the other way. A very solid forward. I don't know a ton about him in terms of why things didn't work out in Vancouver for him, but
great first year, but just could not get it together this year for whatever reason.
So anyway, I just don't think there was a parallel in Winnipeg to be had for him. So obviously Sean Monahan is the target, and a great two-way center, great with young players, playing alongside Cole Perfetti and Nikolai Ehlers, two elitely skilled forwards right now. So interesting to see how it sort of unfolds here, but I think if you're a Winnipeg Jets fan, you got to be pretty pumped up about what the Winnipeg Jets got in Sean Monahan.
Well, we've got your thoughts on the trade so far. We certainly will weigh in and get the fans' thoughts on it as I asked the question of the week about what your thoughts were of the Sean Monahan deal. We'll get to that here momentarily. Just there's so many. You've touched on some of the reasons of why Sean Monahan is a bonus for the Jets. Another thing is his faceoffs.
Yeah.
The Jets, right before the break, they had a really tough time in the faceoff circle against the Toronto Maple Leafs in the back to the home and home series. The Jets, clearly with the amount of talent that they have, their star players need to have the puck. And winning faceoffs is such an integral part and might help out the power play a little bit, which is a little short right now. That being said, Jets have never, we've gone over, I don't need to go into why we feel the power play is not been what it should be because of missing pieces so far this year. But winning faceoff, such a huge part of that. Sean Monahan, 55% coming into Winnipeg this season so far with the Montreal Canadiens. So a welcome addition indeed. And that takes us to our next part. He made his debut against the Pittsburgh Penguins.
Yep.
You're just coming back yesterday, so you didn't get to see the game itself.
I watched the first half in the airport.
Yeah, that is commitment. So they fall 3-0 to the Pittsburgh Penguins. Tristan Jarry, for whatever reason, has the Jets' numbers, never lost. His goals against average just over 1. Another shutout yesterday. But the Jets did have their chances. The one part, the game where the game turns, Brendan Dillon receives a match penalty for illegal contact, illegal hit to the head. He will have a conversation with the NHL Department of Player Safety a little bit later today. This is happening. We're recording this on Tuesday, it's Wednesday now. I'm losing track of time.
Wednesday.
It's Wednesday, so he'll have that conversation. Whether or not he'll be suspended, you'll have to wait and see. Of course, go to winnipegjets.com or follow us on Twitter. Where are the other? Instagram. But
all of them.
Just go to Twitter, X as it is, to find out the latest information on that. But it just. We can argue whatever if it was worth it, but it's just a big loss for the Jets, who just seem to be having issues keeping 6 defensemen in the lineup on the ice. They lost Josh Morrissey. They've had, of course, the Brendan Dillon the penalty in Pittsburgh yesterday. So of course, going down to 5 defensemen, very challenging.
It is
for the amount of time that they've had to do it.
Yep, and I mean your whole rhythm then gets thrown off, and you guys have guys playing more minutes than they're used to playing, and I think your matchups change. So, especially with Brendan Dillon being the physical force that he is, and he plays the line for sure in a lot of scenarios, but I think for the most part he's a very clean player. Especially since he's gotten here to Winnipeg. So, obviously unfortunate situation in Pittsburgh last night. You never want to see somebody get hurt, and I think Brendan Dillon would probably tell you the exact same thing too. But it is a bit odd that they can't seem to keep all 6 D-men in the lineup for a game on a just for one game. But we'll see what happens, who comes in, if there's a suspension, not sure yet. So lots to unfold there.
100%. And the Jets had obviously some thoughts after the game, losing 3-0 to Pittsburgh. Here's Mark Scheifele, Neil Pionk, and of course head coach Rick Bowness.
You guys had a lot of good looks tonight. Yeah, we had a ton of good looks. He made some big saves. They blocked a lot of shots, had some good sticks, so I don't think that's anything to get frustrated about. We made a lot of good plays. We made a lot of good entries. Nothing to be frustrated about there.
A little bit of everything. He made some good saves, but we got to settle the puck down, get some quality shots too. I know we're a little shot happy right now, pass happy. We're a little scrambly right now, so it's on us. We have no one to blame but ourselves.
Yeah, it's another game where we're playing too much with 5 defensemen, but again, that's hockey. We had enough good looks to crawl back into that game, and the similarity in the 4 games right now is our inability to score. We're not getting outworked. We're not getting outplayed. We're just not scoring right now. The offense is a little bit out of sync. Mark needs a couple of games. Sean needs a couple of games. We're going to be fine. We'll be all right.
Hi, I'm Mark Scheifele.
Oh, here comes Scheifele, moves in, shoots and scores!
And this is the Ground Control Podcast.
All right, so tough loss The Jets, though, the schedule has been great for them this year, and it's tremendous in the month of February.
Yeah.
They play Philadelphia on Thursday. They come home to play Pittsburgh on Saturday, and then don't play again until Wednesday.
Yeah, and that
against San
Pittsburgh
Jose.
game, they play Friday in Mini.
Yeah. So
I'm not saying it's, just it's a nice little bonus.
100%. And I also promised that we would get to your comments, and you being the fans, about the trade with Sean Monahan coming to Winnipeg. And of course, I put the question out to you, the fans, about what your thoughts were on the Sean Monahan deal. So we'll just go through a few of them here, starting with my favorite one was the Sean Monahan one. And of course, is Sean Monahan going to come? Boring Sean Monahan going to come back on Twitter? And
Not sure.
He liked the tweet. He or whoever's running the Twitter page is not Sean Monahan that we know of.
No.
So hopefully they come out of retirement. We'll find out about a little bit later about that. Partial Breakaway Podcast said better fit in Winnipeg than Lindholm. Producer Scott said for what the Jets gave up to get him, I really hope he produces points like a superstar. And then, of course, on top of that, John Cutler adds, hope it turns out to be like the Stastny trade and not the Hayes trade. Of course, Kevin Hayes here for not very long.
No.
And it was just 6 games against St. Louis Blues. Of course, Paul Stastny, the trade, that was a huge trade, caught everybody off guard. That was at the deadline.
Yeah.
And then the Jets went to the Western Conference Final to go out and all the way to the Western Conference Final to face the Vegas Golden Knights. Tremendous run, so I could see where that one's coming from. But we'll have to see how Sean Monahan shakes out, and very interested to see how this plays out.
Yeah, obviously, like we've talked about, two-way center.
Yeah.
Good with young players. Great on faceoffs. Time will tell.
Yeah, and that's all we can do at this point. And then what else we can do right now is we're going to get to some other big news that came out of the NHL All-Star Weekend. But first, here's my conversation with former Winnipeg Jet and current Chicago Blackhawks broadcaster, Troy Murray.
He is the color radio analyst of the Chicago Blackhawks and former Winnipeg Jet, Troy Murray. Troy, thanks so much for joining us this afternoon. How are you today?
I'm doing good, Jamie. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Listen, I got to ask. I love the Jets gear. Tell us the story behind that. Where you got that from? Is in the great city of Chicago.
Well, you obviously know Zinger, and we go way back. I've been battling cancer and everything. So for Hockey Fights Cancer Night, Zinger got me the hat, and he got this hoodie made up with my number on it, and gave it to me. It was something special, and I keep it, and I wear the hat quite a bit.
Troy, you were here for such a short time, but to have the relationships that you have from your time in Winnipeg says a lot about that team and says a lot about the city, does it not?
You know what? I loved Winnipeg. I really enjoyed my time there. We had a great group of guys. Keith Tkachuk came in. Zamnoff was there his rookie season. Timo Solani, obviously his rookie season was phenomenal. John Paddock was the coach. I still keep in touch with him. I see Zinger all the time. I really enjoyed my time there. The people were excellent. I loved the organization. They were tremendous to me when I was there. And actually, I got traded back to Chicago, and I was disappointed that I was leaving Winnipeg to go back to Chicago because I enjoyed Winnipeg that much.
Listen, it says a lot about you. You were named captain your first year here. What did that mean to you? That had to say something about the player that you were and the person that you were as well.
Yeah, I think when Mike Smith, initiated the trade to bring me to Winnipeg, there was a leadership component to that trade, and I had a great conversation with John Paddock that summer, and he said, Troy, we want to make a change here, and we'd like you to be our captain. And I was very honored. I was surprised, but very honored to be put in that position, and it was something that I really cherished. And I had the opportunity to be around some great people and some great players there. And Thomas Dean was the longtime captain there. And it certainly was kind of a situation where I didn't want to step on anybody's toes or anything like that. So I did have a conversation with Thomas, and he was totally fine with it. And it was a big honor for me to be put in that situation, and the trust of the general manager, the organization, and the coaching staff in me was something that I'll always remember.
What was the challenge for you to be the new guy and the captain at the same time?
Well, you know what? I think when it's just like a trade. you're disappointed to leave one team, but you're welcomed into the locker room with the others. And they made some adjustments that summer, and they wanted to kind of have a different feel to the season. So, again, I felt a little bit uncomfortable being put in that position because I knew that Thomas had been there and had been the captain for a long time, that I didn't want to, be in the way of something that he was building or anything like that. But, they asked and they explained why they wanted to do it. And again, it was just an honor to be put in that position. And I think everybody in the room, respected, whether Thomas Dean was wearing a letter or not. I mean, he was the guy inside the room, and Randy Carlyle was there. So there were some great leaders that were already in place. And I just kind of worked alongside with them. I mean, it wasn't me being just the sole leader of that team. We had great people inside the room, and we had a great group of guys that I just, I leaned on myself to be put in a situation because they had been there before, Randy Carlyle and Thomas Dean, guys like Phil Housley as well.
Yeah, Randy seems like such a gruff guy. He has this tough exterior.
Listen, it's all on the outside. On the inside, he's a marshmallow, and he knows that. But he was a veteran player, and he did his own thing, and everybody respected him for who he was and what he had accomplished. And he was a great role model for me. I really loved being around him. And but he had that sarcastic sense of humor that sometimes you didn't know which way he was going or what. Was he kidding? Is he serious? But I loved being around Randy. I thought he was just a great guy.
When he was coaching and you were in the media business at that point, did you get a couple of chuckles with how he dealt with the media as a coach, watching it from the media perspective?
Yeah, it is funny, Jamie, because when you move to the other side of the equation, and for me as a player, then as a broadcaster, you look at it in a completely different light. And I think Randy, as a coach, still had that dry sense of humor that he relayed to the media when he was talking to the media. There was always that hint of sarcasm whenever he was talking. That you kind of looked at the reporters and they're like, "What is he serious? What is he talking about?" But again, that was his personality, and he was so much fun to be around. Just a great guy, but again, gruff on the outside, but soft in the middle.
Yeah, and when we speak about tough on the outside and soft in the middle, we talk about Craig Heisinger. And listen, I love talking to Jets alumni because there's so many great stories about Zinger. And you said he has this hat collection, and I texted Zinger about it, and he gave me the old eye roll or head slap thing. So please share with us about his cap collection.
So he in his training room, he would have all the hats up on the wall like this. Yeah, and he was really proud of his collection. And they sat up there, and they just were there on the wall like this. So I would go in, I'd take a Sharpie, and I signed the underneath of the brim of all his favorite hats, and I put them back on the wall. So he didn't even know that I had signed them. And then one day, he, I don't know what happened. He took a hat off the wall, and he saw my signature on there, and he's like, "What the?" He looks at another one. This was his treasured hat collection that he had. He was collecting these hats from all over, and he was so mad at me that I signed every hat, ruined his collection. He was so mad at me. He just was like, and then he's still mad today. Well, he told me a story. I was up in his office when I started, back in media, and Winnipeg was back in the NHL. Yeah. So I was up in Zinger's office, and we talked about the hat collection story, and he just started laughing. He goes, and my nickname was Muzz. He goes, Muzz. He says, I threw out all the hats. Mm-hmm. I kept one that had your signature on it, and that's why I kept that hat, because he wanted to have the one hat with my signature on it. He says, I kept one just to remind me.
Where did Muzz come from?
Oh boy, that goes way back. I played for the St. Albert Saints in Tier 2 in St. Albert with Mark Messier, and Doug Messier was our coach, and we had a little stick boy named Jimmy Bukansky, and he named it, Mark Messier's nickname was Mezzer. So I was a young kid and I was playing in the Saints. He goes, "Well, you're Murray, he's Mezzer. I'm going to call you Muzzer." And so that's kind of where it came from. I was probably 16 years old, and through my hockey career that stayed there. Not many people outside of the hockey world call me that, but inside the hockey world, it's still kind of my nickname.
It's amazing how long these nicknames stick for when they have such early, roots, right?
Yeah, and I actually, when I got to Chicago, Murray Bannerman was our goaltender, and his nickname was Muzz. So every time somebody said Muzz, I was turning around, and they weren't talking to me.
Listen, you cover the current game as a radio analyst. What does going back to the Olympics mean for the National Hockey League, in your opinion?
Well, I think it's just, it's the biggest stage in sports, the Olympics. And, for hockey, I think it's such a big part of it, and it's such a big draw. It's one of the most popular sports in the Winter Olympics. And I think that if you're going to be put on that stage and you look at all the other events, it's the world's best against the world's best. And so this is what you're looking at. Again, you're looking at the world's best. And I understand, there's complications. And, back in the early 80s, actually kind of in my time when I came into the NHL, I was between University of North Dakota and, coming and turning pro, or sticking around and maybe playing in the Olympics. So I missed that kind of window to be an amateur playing in the Olympics. But I think on that stage, when you look at the Olympics and what it means, it's the best against the best.
Yeah.
And so for the NHL to be back there, you're going to see, every great player in the game today from all different countries playing against one another. And I think that's kind of the showcase of what the NHL wants to put out there, is the opportunity to show off the game of hockey and how good it is and what it means to the Olympics.
Can you imagine that we've missed out on Connor McDavid and Nathan McKinnon and Mark Scheifele at the Olympic Games, and Connor Bedard's coming up now as a young player in the Chicago Blackhawks. We've missed a lot of that, haven't we?
Yeah, and I think for the players themselves, to be in that, to have that opportunity to represent your country in the Olympics is something really special. So for a guy like Connor McDavid, he might make the Canadian team, or he might not. I don't know, but if he just happens to make it, I think that it's a great opportunity, and again, it's a great honor to represent your country at that level, and to be put in the spotlight against the other best teams in the world, the best players in the world. I think is very meaningful for all these players, and for the years that they missed it, I think they understand the situation, the complexity of the NHL players going, because it's just not as simple as saying we're going to send a team there. You've got all kinds of insurance issues. There's all kinds of stuff that goes on there. Whether your top player gets hurt in the Olympics, that's tough on an owner, because they're saying, listen, we're going for the Stanley Cup here, and we've got all our best players on our team playing on this stage. Well, what happens if somebody gets hurt? And that's always the possibility, whether you're playing in the Olympics or anywhere else. Yeah. But there's a lot of complications to get it done. But I think the players certainly appreciate and will cherish that opportunity. And anybody, there was a lot of guys that played in the heyday for the Blackhawks there on the Olympic team. And you look at, guys like Taves, Kane, Sharp,
Seabrook,
Keith, Jonathan, Hossa. There were so many guys on that team, and they, whether they won or lost, memories that will never be forgotten. And I think that's what it's all about.
The Hawks have played against the top 6 teams in the Western Conference quite a bit. You got Dallas, you got Winnipeg, you got Colorado, Vegas, Edmonton, Vancouver. What has impressed you about Winnipeg so much this early in the season, and as we get into the final stretch here?
I look at Winnipeg and to me, a little bit surprising how well they've done and how consistent they've been. And they've dealt with some major injuries, obviously, to a couple of their key players, which is tough. But I look at the Jets, and I look at, and Rick Bowness is a dear friend of mine, and I know that he's gone through some tough times this year. But he's a great coach. And I think that the one thing that as a broadcaster, when I talk to other teams or coaches and stuff like that, the one thing that they talk about Winnipeg is they've all bought into the structure of how they need to play to be successful. And I think that really goes a long way, whether it's the top line in Winnipeg, whether it's your fourth line, first pair, D or last pair, they're all playing the same way. They're all committed to to doing what they need to do as a group to get the job done. And then they've got one of the best goaltenders in the league. So, tough to get through their structure. They do an excellent job defending in their own end of the ice. And then surprisingly, I think that the offense that maybe some people didn't think would be there is there. And, they made a nice addition here in the last little bit too, to solidify their center position. So, I think that they're a well-coached hockey team, and they're a team that if you take lightly, you're going to be in a lot of trouble.
Yeah, and I look at a guy like Sean Monahan. A lot of people that see this trade, they see him as a second-line center. But Sean Monahan's at Winnipeg Jet for more reasons than that. And we've heard about the chemistry and the way he deals with young players. How important is that in today's game, that a veteran player is good with younger players?
No better example than what we've had here in Chicago. Being in a position to get lucky and get Connor Bedard.
Mm-hmm.
If you're Kyle Davidson, you look at, Connor Bedard coming in as an 18-year-old, you need to surround him with some good veteran people and some presence inside the locker room. And I wouldn't say this, 100% for sure, but I wouldn't think that, Corey Perry, who now is in Edmonton, Nick Foligno and Taylor Hall, I don't know if that trade is made if they don't have Connor Bedard on board.
Right.
But, you bring in a former first-round draft pick, or first overall pick in Taylor Hall, so he kind of knows how to deal with it. He's been in the league. He's an MVP, so he can kind of mentor Connor Bedard. And then Nick Foligno has been just a phenomenal addition, and they've signed him to a 2-year extension, and rightly so, because they build that culture inside the locker room, and that culture that Nick Foligno brought into the room, that Taylor Hall will when he comes back from his injury, along with guys like Connor Murphy, Seth Jones, some of the veteran players. Jason Dickinson has really stepped up in his leadership role, and that's crucial in trying to create the culture that needs to be inside that room. And that goes from the older guys who, whether they've learned it or not, whether they've won a cup like a Tyler Johnson inside the room, that speaks volumes about how you want to develop your culture. And Kyle Davidson, the general manager here in Chicago, has identified some key players here, bringing Jason Dickinson back because he's bringing that leadership, because he's a guy that's well respected inside the locker room. And then Nick Foligno, another 2-year extension. They want those guys around to bring the Connor Bedards and the young players, the prospects that are going to be coming in. Vlasic on the defensive side of it with Murphy and Seth Jones. They've got a lot of really high-end prospects coming in the next couple seasons. They loaded up with draft picks, and that they still have a ton more coming. So the next 2 to 3 years, you're going to see a lot of players filter into that room that are young, and they want the culture to be established the right way. And that's why you bring in veteran players like a Sean Monahan that can help. A guy like, Nick Foligno, those guys are they're hard to find. And when you get an opportunity to bring that type of player into the organization, you do whatever you need to do.
And further to that, you were a center for a long time. That was your position. How important are faceoffs? Like, I think, that was part of what Sean was brought in, 55% guy in the faceoff circle like that. How integral is that to your success as a team in the playoffs and the stretch run, obviously?
I'm a stickler on that. And I know people kind of probably sit there and they go, whatever, but it's puck possession. In all zones. And when you have a guy like Patrice Bergeron, Jonathan Toews for so many years, one of the, 2 of the best face-off guys, you put those guys out, and 60% of the time you have puck possession. And when you get into the playoffs, down the stretch run, you need those reliable guys that, okay, we need a defensive zone face-off. We need to win this. Sean Monahan could be one of those guys that goes into that situation. Saw it for so many years here with Jonathan Toews. Every big face-off, Joe Quenneville or, Jeremy Colleton or Luke Richardson, you don't even have to look up and down the bench. You just kind of make eye contact with Toews, who's already got 1 foot over the boards kind of thing, because he knows that's what he needs to do. And, I think that it's so important, especially when you have skilled players.
Yeah.
If you have skilled players, most of them are not wired to get the puck back. They're wired to have the puck. So, when Patrick Kane was on the ice, if you didn't win the faceoff, Well, he spends 25 seconds chasing the puck around, probably in your own zone for a little bit. You get the puck and maybe you've got 15 seconds left of lung capacity, before you kind of start. But if you win the draw, you're going to put the puck in the hands of those skilled players right away. And, defensively, those faceoffs are critical to eliminate offensive opportunities. Then you flip it down in the offensive zone. I mean, so many teams now have set plays. I know Winnipeg has them as well. You win those faceoffs, and all of a sudden it should be a scoring chance, or at least an opportunity to get the puck to the net. In the neutral zone, it's all about puck possession. And, if you lose the draw in the neutral zone, I would say 95%. I don't know what the analytics would say, but it usually ends up in the offensive zone of the team that wins the faceoff. So now you've got your best skilled players defending, and that's not where you want them to be playing.
Yeah, I love that explanation so much. And, we talk about captaincy. Adam Lowry is the captain of the Winnipeg Jets. When you saw that news, and knowing Adam as well as you do, how happy were you for the organization, and what did you see? Have you seen a change, I guess, since Adam Lowry became the captain?
You know what? I certainly don't want to be critical in anything that was before Adam, but when you look at, and I know he's an old soul, and you look at Nick Foligno, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. With Adam and his father Dave, who I played against basically my entire career. He was just one of those guys that played the game honestly and played it the right way. And I've been able to see what it means. Like a Connor Murphy, I mean, his father played, Gord played. So those guys kind of develop a culture within themselves, and it may not. And I was, when you looked at, when I was named captain, I wasn't the best player on the team by far. I mean, we had some great players and some skilled players. But when I looked at when Adam Lowry was named captain, I go, you know what? I love it, because he's like Nick Foligno. He knows the game. He knows how to support his players. He knows when he needs to jump in and do something. Just an honest player. Is he the best player in the team? No. Is he the leader of that team? And I think they have a lot of guys in the room, but he understands the way that the game needs to be played in today's game. And that's the same as Nick Foligno here in Chicago. He's not a captain, but he's just, he's an old soul player. He's an old school guy. And that's what I see in Adam Lowry. And that's kind of what I see now is that culture of that team, all buying in, sticking together, playing for one another. And that comes from their leadership all the way down.
Yeah. And, and last one for you, how was your heart when you heard about Judy and her health challenges, and knowing Rick as well as you do?
Yeah, that was tough. I mean, people will ask me, and I played in Chicago for 10 years, and then Winnipeg, and Ottawa, Pittsburgh, and Colorado. I had some great coaches, but Rick was. They say, who was your favorite coach? And I'll say Rick Bowness. And we were a terrible team in Ottawa. I mean, that was like, the infancy stages of Ottawa coming into the NHL and drafting Alexander Daig, and we had Yashin, some real young players. And another reason why I was kind of brought in to that situation in Ottawa to help some of those younger players. But I loved Rick Bowness. And so I really become close to him, and over the years, we've always kept in touch, and I think Rick does an excellent job of keeping touch with former players and that kind of thing. So when Judy had her health issues and Rick stepped away, that was a tough one. And I texted him right away, and he got back to me, thank you, Troy, and thoughts and prayers are with you. So when you see something like that to a special person like Rick, and there's a reason why he's coached or been a coach in whether it's a head coach or assistant coach for more games than anybody in the NHL, because he's a good person. Yeah. And people like him around, but he's also an honest coach. He's a great person and an honest coach. And when I think if you're looking at the personality of a coach, you want to respect him as a person and what he brings to life. And then you look at, is he a good coach? And I think Rick has both of those. So when the news broke that Judy was not feeling well and he took some time away, I think that, in a lot of ways, the entire hockey world, who most of these players, fathers, or, they they've been in touch with Rick Bowness in a lot of ways because he's been around for so long that I think it really was tough on the whole hockey world, and it was tough to see. And I'm glad that he's back coaching and Judy's feeling better. I know it's a long process yet, but she's doing well.
Yeah, the best part, Troy, is I heard Rick say that one positive that came out of Judy's health issues is that everyone knows her name now. It's not just Rick Bowness's wife. It's just how he says everybody when they ask him about Judy, like, how's Judy doing? Instead of how's your wife doing, everyone knows who Judy is now. She's become famous.
Yeah, and I think that's special. I mean, you can tell that they're very close, and it was really tough on Rick to go through that. And obviously Judy was the one with the health issues, but you go through that together, and I know that was really tough on Rick. And I think it was a great example that life is much more important than the game. And everybody understood, take as much time as you need. Whatever you need, we're here to support you. And that's what I love about hockey. I mean, whether it's, I'm dealing with issues, obviously, but, you look at some guys that, recently, a good Western boy, Darren Kimball going through cancer, Kelly Chase, so, it affects everybody and nobody likes that. But what I've found is the hockey community is such a special group of people, whether it's the current players, past players, teammates, guys that you ran across, everybody is reaching out, and that support is tremendous. And it goes a long way in knowing that you have that support throughout the hockey community.
Troy, I really appreciate your time. Thanks for looking at the past, the present, and the future with us. And we wish you all your best with the health. And I love that you're Go Jets go, and appreciate that. And I can't wait to tell Zinger what you said about the hat collection. So thanks so much.
Zinger, he's going to roll his eyes because and just ask him, Jamie, how mad he was, because he was so mad that I ruined his hat collection. But after he got mad, he would laugh because he's like, that's a good one.
Thanks so much, Troy.
Thanks for having me, Jamie. I appreciate it.
Last but not least, big news coming out of the All-Star game. Best on best hockey is coming back.
Yeah.
There'll be the Four Nations Challenge. There'll be United States, Canada, Finland, Sweden. That will happen in 2025 in February. It'll be over 9 days. So you don't. It's not everything at once, but it's a good appetizer for best on best hockey.
It is, and I think being employees of the Winnipeg Jets, it is a prerequisite that you just are not allowed to like Connor McDavid.
Yeah.
You have to cheer against him. That's how it works.
Yes, it is.
Same with Nathan McKinnon and all these great players. Sidney Crosby, obviously right now. But I think it's in the best interest of the game of hockey and the NHL for a little bit of a break from the standard format that hockey has become and have this best on best.
Yeah.
Seeing those elite players actually play with each other instead of battling against one another, I think is just an absolute treat for hockey fans. It's good to get the rivalries going in terms of the international competitions, and then that bleeds into your NHL rivalries as well.
Yeah.
I think it's good for the game. It's great for the fans. It's good for growing the game. That's the other thing. So it'll be a nice little break from the All-Star game, obviously, too. So I think the NHL is doing a great thing here. Yeah, the
NHL, the All-Star game, for those of you that saw it, it was much better. I don't know, the little tweaks they made to it. The skills competition was fantastic. Connor McDavid, of course, having a part in that and rejigging things a little bit to make it a little bit more interesting and more competitive. And when you put $1 million on the line, that makes things way more interesting.
Everybody
obviously.
Steps it up a little bit, I would
for
hope.
some reason.
Except Kucherov, apparently.
Such a great player. And on top of that, the NHL is going to the Olympics, so it'll be 2026 in Italy. That's the best on best we've all been waiting for, and of course, so that means no All-Star game for 2025 and 2026 as we get back to best on best format. Welcome news indeed from the NHL All-Star game. So that'll do it for us in this edition of Ground Control, the official podcast of the Winnipeg Jets. He is Tyler Esquivel. I'm Jamie Thomas, and of course, many thanks to former Winnipeg Jet Troy Murray for joining us here. We'll see you next week.